Chapter 4. The fleet ship wouldn't move. For 3 days standard, she simply hovered there in orbit. I was getting itchy. The crew was getting scared. So was Borglin, though I doubted anyone but me could see it. To save scanning power, we hid on the near moon, the one that, like Luna, has a perennially dark side. Borglin thought he might as well take the opportunity to show me my prize. He was going to have to before I started moving anyway. So we glided down easily beside. I pulled on a suit and walked over to give it the eye. No evidence of a crash. In such a small ship, such a long, long way from home, you would expect to see something dramatic. But the landing had been exceedingly clean. Everything was intact. It was an Arcstar Model 4, the kind used to ferry the brass between starships for face-to-face meetings of top security, as if the ants could give a damn what we transmitted anyway. And for its designated task, it was wildly overqualified in the best spend military spend tradition. I believe it sold completely outfitted for about $18 million in the civilian world. Throw in another $4 or $5 million for tactical blaze capacity. A sweet deal for me. Inside, I saw the reason for the clean landing. The pilot and/or crew had abandoned it some time ago, leaving it on scanner recovery mode. There was no telling how long it had drifted before the scanners picked this moon to land on. I thought about it a second. They had started selling these to the military at the beginning of the war. It could have been drifting for over 4 years then. Probably had. In the drop bay, I found the suit. I had never seen one up close before, but anyone would know what it was. It was the black sheen worn by the guy in the vid show, the scout who never reported back. But unlike the show business type, the scars and imperfections on this one were real. The poor bastard who wore this thing had been through it for a fact. The left shoulder was particularly discolored, suggesting a many-second exposure to an ant blast. I felt myself shuddering. It might have been for the lot of the almost certainly dead owner. It might have been for the whole war. Damn. Interstellar war. Who'd have thought that we could be so stupid? The speakers crackled next to my ears. "Well, what do you think, Jack?" asked Borglin from the Coyote. "It's dead." "Well, of course it is, damn it!" He sounded exasperated. "What would you expect? Do you have any idea how far away we are from anything at all?" "Activate the board." "Like hell. I haven't got power to spare for that. I'll give you fuel when I get mine, and not before." "Activate it," I insisted. "This could be null bank as far as I know. You could spare enough juice to let me see if it's capable." He was silent, thinking. I could hear his heavy breathing from those huge lungs. "All right, just a minute," he said after a while. There was a brief pause, and then the panel flickered. It flickered again, flashed on strong, and glowed. I went through the check. She was, as I had expected, fine. Except for power, she was ready to go. And for a brief instant, my frustration at not being able to lift it then and there was so great as to be physically painful. What a ship. To be aloft and on my own and, well, aloft, there was so much left to do. "While I'm at this business of showing good faith, I may as well go all the way." I heard him giving orders for a simultaneous relay transmission. Lo and behold, the Treasury light beacon responded. I keyed the display and sat down on the pilot seat with a thud. C-24 million. And change had just been transferred over. Wow. If I had been at least willing to go along with Borglin before, now I was damn near eager. Hell, I was eager. To hell with mutinies and fleet regs and the rest of it. With this ship and all those credits, hell, I might become the great and famous Jack Crow I had read so much about. I hadn't realized I was laughing out loud until I heard Borglin sourly order me to cut it out and return. Without hesitation, I obeyed. On some impulse, I grabbed up the suit and carried it with me. It was an offhand, thoughtless gesture, an icing deed to go along with my mood, and, incredibly, the single most important action I had ever undertaken. But no one knew that then, certainly not me. I was too busy planning and grinning and planning. When I cycled back in, I heard the fleet ship had driven away. We moved in immediately. In the hours before landfall, Borglin gave me what little he had on the project director. He read to me from the display. Hollis Ware, 31, Standard. A list of the schools he went to. A long list. Seems the man is a genius. That would explain his youth. Borglin's eyebrows lifted. What do you mean? He's pretty young to be in charge of a fleet project. Is that a big deal? Pretty big. Essentially lord of all he surveys. Very interesting. Still, he's not the fleet. I lit a cigarette from the box on his desk. Close enough. That fleet ship could have been the last for a long time. That's why they have colonies like this. It saves money. You have to sign on for a 3-year stretch, and during that time... The director is all-powerful, yes, I see. And he's a young man. A young genius, I corrected. Borglin nodded vaguely, lost in the possibilities. I changed the subject. What's the specialty? What? The purpose of the project. What are they studying? Oh. Says here he's a statistical historian. Never heard of it. Let's see. Projections of optimum conditions for specific permutations as regards to... What the hell is all that supposed to mean? Here, I offered. Let me. I stood up and went around to the other side of the desk to check the screen for myself. Borglin grumbled his irritation. He was already angered at the thought of losing any of the trappings of captain. But I worked myself in there anyway, reading the display over his shoulder while he went through an elaborate ritual of lighting his cigarette, pretending not to be interested, and trying to keep up with the speed of the scan, all at the same time. I read for several minutes, nodding to myself and occasionally muttering, I see, under my breath. Not because I really saw. Most of the stuff was as much beyond me as it was to the mutineer. I only did it because I knew it would make him feel a little less invulnerable. I would not, forget the incident with Twala. At last, I went back around to my seat and sat. I lit another cigarette and stared at the smoke as if I was immersed in the contemplation of all that wonderfully intricate data. The fact was that I had understood maybe 1 word in 10 once it had gotten down to specifics. But I had learned a couple of things. 1, it was a relatively new and fascinating field of study. And 2, Hollis Ware would have to be a genius to understand it, much less found it as the banks had said. Well, asked Borglin irritably after he could no longer stand the suspense, a time span of perhaps 20 seconds. Before I answered, I filed the memory of his impatience in a safe place. Where's working for Fleet? I know that much, goddammit! He snapped angrily. No, I mean the real Fleet, the fighting arms. He's involved with the Ant War. Really? How so? From what I could understand, it seems he's trying to determine why our casualties have been so high. Borglin stared at me for a second, then burst into wild, deep, uncontrollable laughter. He laughed and laughed until his face got red and tears formed at the corners of his eyelids. At last, he settled down into the occasional chuckle stage where he could talk. But even then, he didn't speak, lost in his own thoughts and staring into space. Every few seconds, his eyes would shine and the corners of his cavernous mouth would twist up, remembering. I had time to take in the tone of all that. There was more than a little sadness in his hilarity, and an unsettling amount of bitterness. I wondered then, for the first time, what had happened to make him lead a mutiny, and why, despite the expected problems, the crew seemed more righteous about their previously violent actions than I would have thought possible. I thought about all of that, and then I thought for the 50th or 200th time how glad I was that I had no part in the ant war or the ants. "All that money," he said at last. "All that money and time and all those people to boot. All to answer that question. To find out something any grade 10 undertech could have told him." "What's that? Why are we having such terrible casualties?" He looked at me with a sudden, heart-stopping sobriety. He looked right into my eyes, but he was seeing something I knew I would never see, never hear him tell. "I'll tell you why, Jack. Because no one, I mean no one, at Fleet has the slightest idea of what they're doing, and every poor son of a bitching one of us knew it." I sat silently, taking in not just what he had said, but the painful way he said it. "There's a little more to it than that, of course," he added after a moment. "There always is," I replied, almost to myself. He looked at me, nodded slowly, almost suspiciously. "Yeah, there always is at that. But that's the meat of it, what I told you. That's..." And then he was gone again. "That's the meat." We spoke little more after that. He went over my cover story a couple of times. We talked about communications and timetables. He gave me the name of my contact in the refugee village called Sanction City. I mentioned that I wanted to take the suit along. "What suit?" he asked. "The scout suit. You know, the black one I brought back from the sled." "Oh," he said unhappily. "I ordered it spaced." "What?" I cried aghast. "You mean it's gone?" "Gone or going, what difference does it make?" "Call him. See if you can stop it. I want to take it with me." Borglin, clearly uneasy, nevertheless obeyed. He got on the horn and located the suit, a scant 2 minutes or so before it was to be ejected. On my insistence, he ordered it placed in the life ship. "What the hell do you want with that thing?" he growled after he had finished. "It's an offering for wear. Just the kind of thing a historian type would find interesting." Borglin frowned. "I doubt that." "It's better than nothing," I countered, but I was puzzled. Why was he so cavalier with such an expensive, hell, irreplaceable piece of equipment? I asked him. The answer came in that dead sober, grinding way he had when he talked about the war. "This ship is out of the war business. At least, out of the ant war business." Then he made a gesture which clearly told me to change the subject. I did. We parted. He had given me the only answer that interested him. If he could have gotten his bulk into that suit himself, he wouldn't have. It was the war to him. It was the ants. This bloodthirsty criminal, so eager to kill when it suited him, so enamored of pseudo-sadism, was terrified of the ants. I filed that away too. Twala, bless her endless thighs, was there at the lock to wish me off, looking like an overgrown schoolgirl and acting worse. I had to stand on tiptoe to kiss her goodbye.